Welcome back to your Networth's Network. I'm your host, Corey McNabb, and this is a networking style podcast where we bring up special guests, learn a little about themselves, about their business, and see how we can all help each other. Um, excuse me, got a little congestion going on. My goal in life is to rise to a place of excellence, and I want to bring you with me. So, that being said, let's bring up our special guest, the closing realtor himself. I probably said this wrong, Mr. Brandon Bell.
It's close. Closing Bell Real Estate. Closing Bell
Ah,
Realtor. I appreciate it, man. Appreciate you having me on. Really
yeah, no
excited
problem,
about
brother.
this.
So I know we go way back, but for the audience, I want you to give us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so Corey and I actually met at the fire department, local fire station here in Metro Atlanta. Really got to get to know each other in recruit school, giving each other a hard time. I was real big on testing anxiety. So Corey, obviously being the first one out of every test, knew what he was doing. Intelligent guy, really wrapping his head around just anything, any challenge that came his way. It intrigued me, and so we kept in touch. Just without going too deep into it, unless you want me to, I stepped into real estate full time. My intent was to get my license and use that on the investment side of things, as I wanted to, as many of you, just dive into the investment side. And my desire was getting that license was going to help me do that quicker, and it did. But it also brought its own challenges and such too. So that was about a little over 2 years ago now since I have went full time in real estate. Started investment properties and stuff at the beginning, and then my wife was 8 months pregnant, and we made the jump, transitioned at that time. It was sink or swim, truly, and man, I wouldn't change a thing about it. And here we are 2 years in, and it's thriving. I thank God for all of it. He's been heavily involved in it, and it's been very clear in different steps how that has come to pass.
Man, yeah, I know there was a lot of like, what are you doing? Jumping out of the fire department, going into real estate while your wife is pregnant. And I get it. Like a lot of the people we work with have a certain mindset, and I'm not dogging on them, but like I understand. I actually commend you for it. I personally I can't do that just yet. But one day, hopefully soon. Um, well, probably not till next year because my wife said that I'm not allowed to leave until we have this third kid because of insurance. So
Yeah. Well, and that's smart on her part. I mean, there's a lot of things, right, that a lot of people don't see. You always see the highlight reels, you always see the Instagram, Facebook, social media, right? What is that? Well, that's our interpretation of what we want people to see. It's truly a front. And I think a lot of people forget that there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes to any success that happens that most people don't acknowledge. Maybe that it's not that they don't know it, but they don't want to acknowledge it because that's not the glamour and the nice side of it. But there was a lot of moments, Corey, where I told myself, "Man, you're stupid," and I dogged on myself. And my wife never once did, and that's one of the things I'm very thankful for. But it also came because I had opportunity, because she had a full time job with great benefits that we were able to lean on through that transition. That otherwise I wouldn't have had that opportunity. And God truly lined up those pieces through my action. There was a lot of preparation for years, right? But it wasn't until I put that action to it, when with us on the same page, that was a huge part of that made that success happen. And man, it's a constant grind. It really is. None of it comes easy. It's just a process, and trusting that process.
I get it. So you're full time, been full time for 2 years, but you're focusing on the investment side. So what exactly is your, I guess, niche, or what are you focusing on?
So I focus primarily on first time investors, obviously due to age, and then first time home buyers. So my goal is to educate those that are not far behind me, right? Or that are interested in getting into investing, but maybe they don't know where to start. Or maybe they're looking at getting their license and they haven't done anything with it. They don't know any good investor friendly agents, but they want to get involved themselves. That's what I specialize in, because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to call. I didn't know what the next step would be and how simple the process can be when you work with the right people. So for me, being able to share what I've learned and then also continue to grow myself and learn what I can learn from those individuals, it's a give and take for sure. It's rewarding in the fact that it's step by step, and getting to watch people succeed in their successes and in their investment dreams and goals is beyond rewarding.
Gotcha. So you act as an agent for investors, or are you investing yourself as well?
Both. So I'm very much so investing myself. It started with Belfry Home Solutions. Actually, I'm drinking out of a coffee cup that's got our logo on it right there. I'm proud of it, man. It was actually born by accident, believe it or not. I called a friend of mine that I grew up with, and we always said we would do business together. Both men of integrity, God fearing men, and both well connected with our communities. And said, "Man, we're going to do business together one day." No idea how yet. And that was 5 years before I ever joined the fire service. I mean, I was like teenage, and we knew one day it was going to happen. Didn't know how. Well, one day I came across an investment opportunity, and we can dive into it as much as you'd like, Corey. I'll leave that to you. But long story short, it provided an opportunity for a partnership that I brought him in on and said, "Look, I'm buying this. I'm giving you the opportunity to be a part of it with me, and I think we both could bring value to one another." And that one kind of was the seed starter of Belfry Home Solutions. And we were able to take a six-figure income within a month and span that across multiple properties, which now has grown to 5 properties. And we're looking at 2 or possibly 3, depending on how the zoning lays out, new construction this year.
Okay, so explain that process. I know you said you got some new construction, so are you buying land and building on it, or
This one,
how did
yeah,
it
this one
start?
in particular ended up being a parcel of land. It had an old dilapidated trailer on it. It's been owned for 20 years by this seller. And they reached out to me. They said, "Brandon, do you know anybody that would buy this? It's trash, it's junk, we can't do anything with it. We just want the money back out of it." Okay, well, let's look and see what that looks like. And as an agent, one of the things that most people need to realize is that you have to disclose that. That's one of the most important aspects that separates being an agent, having a license, from not. And then maintaining your own code of ethics and making sure that you're within that scope. When you're not an agent, you have the freedom to not really worry about that. So that's kind of the restraints and stuff that you have to keep an eye on. Is it essentially gives you some guidelines you have to fall within as you work as an investor. So on that front, I can leverage my license, meaning I go buy this property. They don't have to pay an agent fee. They don't have to pay any other closing fees because I can negotiate those into the deal. Whether we do a seller finance deal, whether we do a standard DSCR loan, which is an investment loan, that's all based on the income producing from the property. Or in this case, it was just a hard money loan. So we borrowed the money from a private investor. We go use those funds that are borrowed, buy this property cash so we can present a cash offer to the seller, and then which typically is a lower price than what that market value would be. But in this case, it had a dilapidated home that had to be cleaned up, that had to have testing done. You have to do asbestos testing and other things before you could even touch it. And then work on the deconstruction of that and how you can set up to build on that. So in this case, that's what we had to do. And we're about 65 grand into the project so far, including purchase price. And it's a little under 2.5 acres that's in Dawsonville. So if anybody in the local area knows, Dawsonville is growing continuously. I'm seeing $500,000 homes built on areas that were $300,000 home areas 2 years ago. And a lot of that's due to the inflation from COVID and stuff pushing north. So I typically will leverage in this investments like that, hard money loan connections, lender connections, business relationships. How can I bring that value, right? It's all about that service. So how can I bring in other people to grow with me? Just like you do with this podcast. It's all about that unity and never being afraid of competition, but remembering that it's a process, and your team and your network is what's going to grow you. But ultimately, the focus shouldn't be that. That's just going to be a reward of what you're doing from focusing on bringing value to other people. So that's essentially what we did with this one, to where as we develop these and we invest in these, we'll turn around and we'll either, depending on what the pricing and numbers look like at the end, we wanted to have multiple exit strategies. So in this case, we will either build these homes and sell them. We can build these homes and refinance them and access that equity back through debt, tax free, and then have a renter pay down that debt. Um, or we can just turn around and pay back the private money lender or maintain that loan for an extended term, and he's making a higher interest rate. It all will depend on how those numbers best lay out based on where we're at and what collateral and capital we need at that time. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, a little bit. So with this, had a trailer on it. You're tearing that down and building what, a single family home, putting
2 to 3
multifamily home.
single family homes, and they will be stick built.
Gotcha.
Yeah. We
Okay.
typically try to focus on the stick-built homes because you're seeing a lot more manufactured homes too and mobile homes that are nicer and much higher end, which do have their benefits. But a lot of properties nowadays, due to the conditions of prior homes and most mobile homes that people are trying to put on properties, the land will end up being sold or be transferred or at some point be picked up with restrictions that don't allow mobile homes. So in order to avoid that altogether, we just plan and do the numbers for a single family home, stick built. And then in the event we ever have the opportunity, or let's say the land doesn't have those restrictions and the numbers make more sense, we'll look and see what that would look like if we just put a mobile home on it and what that would bring. Because it also is going to bring a different reward on the backside necessarily, or a different price point than a stick built home would.
Gotcha. Okay. So 2 to 3 on 2 acres.
Yep.
Gotcha. I know up here in White County, you can only have one building per acre. So,
Yeah. And a lot of those restrictions typically come down to a lot of it, especially on the outer skirts like that, they want to restrict a lot of that tiny growth where the houses are so dang close together. So they'll put those restrictions in place before the growth gets there, which is
yeah.
smart because that's how you maintain that. Where we're at, and just inside Lumpkin County on the east side, or I mean the west side of Lumpkin, we're seeing a lot of 10-acre tracts and such, trying to split up these 60 acres down to 10 so that they don't get subdivided into 50 or 500
Right.
quarter-acre tracts. And a lot of those, though, will come through your one approval that went through planning and zoning. And that's where it was like, let's say it was 100 tract. Well, we had a 70-acre tract right over here. It went to planning and zoning. They had so many neighbors. I met every neighbor at one meeting because they were all there. They've been here for 20, 30 years. And now somebody else was wanting to come in and subdivide a 77-acre tract into a ton of commercial frontage because we're on Highway 9. And then also a bunch of single family in the back, and it was all being disguised as a different, we won't get into all of it, but like it was just not what it was being portrayed as up front to the seller. And so it's a
Gotcha.
lot of that stuff that you kind of, it can work to your advantage as an investor, because when you see people see that kind of thing from a larger corporation and they don't like it, it gives you an angle of, okay, well, if we don't do that, we can readjust and do this, make a better offering. And then they're going to immediately compare it to that and see this as a plus. Whereas if that was never offered, they would look at us like that, if that makes sense. It's
I
really
think I
just
get
a
what you're saying.
perceived perspective based on the standard that the previous offer may have set.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So I kind of get what you're doing now, and I know where you came from. But what I'm curious in is what is your, and the way I asked this to another person is, what is your end of life goal? What does that look like? And then how are you planning on getting there?
Time and generational wealth. That's very simple for me. So my whole goal is, like I was kind of like I was saying, was I want those around me to succeed, and I want to be able to see their successes. I want to look back 20 years from now and say, hey, Corey, do you remember when we sat down and did that podcast, bro? Like, it was so cool. Do you remember when we worked at the fire department and how it all started? Like, it's amazing to see where God intercepted our past and the successes that he brought from that, because we weren't afraid to add value to those around us, even if we were in the same industry. As far as plans to get there, right? It's exactly what we're doing. It's long-term game. It's long-term thought process. It's not something where you want instant gratification so much as, how can I plant seeds now so that 10, 15, 20 years from now, we're reaping the harvest, or my kids are reaping the harvest. And I think that's where that thought process, you really break away from a lot of society by breaking away from this instant gratification mindset. And we could talk on that for hours, but a lot of that's just going to come through real estate and the power of real estate. We see so many gurus, right, talk about it, and so many people talk about it, but everybody's talking. How many of them are actually doing something? And that's where I think a lot of that conviction comes up to me, or came to me, was, listen, this is sink or swim. Like, at some point, I got to make sure me and my wife are on the same page, but there's got to be some form of action, like what you're doing with this, that separates me from where I was yesterday, that helps me look back and say, okay, this is the value I've been adding, and these are the people that I can make a list of that I've been helping in one way or another, because it always comes back.
Yeah. So your vision of generational wealth, is that purely through real estate? Is there other things that you've considered that you want to dabble in? Like, what does that
I
look like
have
for you?
I like the thought, right? I like the concept of purchasing and absorbing businesses, like business acquisition. However, there's also a lot of time and stuff into that. So I feel like in a way it can also counter what I'm ultimately trying to do, right? Which is free up my
Mhm.
time. But the goal also is to free up the time so that you can make more systems in place to make you more time. So it's a cumulative process and it comes in stages, right? You'll go up, you'll plateau, you'll go up again and you'll plateau. So yeah, I think eventually there's a good chance that I'll be in some business acquisition opportunities. But I don't know at what point that is right now because I currently don't have that necessarily listed out on my goal sheet.
Gotcha.
More so on
Okay.
the back burner of, okay, let's get this, this, and this done, and then we will revisit, another 5 year, 10-year plan.
Nice. Nice. Okay, cool. So I don't suppose you want to share your goal sheet. I'm always interested in people's goals.
No, you're good. I mean, so the simple goals for me came down to this year, it was 5 million in sales because last year that's what I had. I don't by any means call that a high agent, but I'm not one to defend where I'm at either because where I'm at is different than where somebody else is at. And that's just in regards to my business aspect and investment side. So I typically correlate them. I typically want to buy half the net sales that I make in real estate. So if I'm selling 5 million in a year, my goal, no matter how absurd this may sound, is two and a half. One way or another, I want to obtain 2.5 million in real estate. And that's just their worth. So you may buy it for 45,000, but if it comes back on appraisal when you refi or you sell it at, 150 or 200,000, well, that's the number I'm putting down because that's what the appraisal came back at, or that's what the sale comp came back at, or the BPI came back at. So that's kind of the way I gauged that goal. So a lot of that, I know I'm kind of rambling here, but a lot of that comes back to just kind of setting these what most would see as unrealistic goals on purpose. Like dream big so that no matter what you do, you will always supersede any goal you might have set otherwise. And then make those chronological steps backwards on how you're going to get there. Because
Mm.
just like anything else, when you write it down, you're putting that in front of yourself. And as most may have picked up already, I'm a very God fearing man. So I see this stuff and I'm like, all right, well, when I write this stuff down, not only is it like, is God going to make it happen? Yeah. But if I want to hold, like if I'm asking God to, I don't know, God, dig me out of this, I'm going to wake up expecting a shovel beside me, not to be out of it. Right. So I look at this stuff and I'm like, all right, God, clearly this is what I want. So if I turn around tomorrow, what steps can I be taking to get out of this? Typically, I end up running into or crossing paths, or somebody comes to my mind, or something happens that brings me back to, well, okay, I remember having that conversation with Corey 3 months ago when he said, hey, man, are you going to do my podcast with me? Well, guess what? We're doing it. And sometimes it just takes that time of like, okay, that's why. So now it's time to do this. Now it's time to place these pieces and then just trusting that God's aligning those pieces as we put action to those plans that we have, trusting too at the end of the day and having confidence in our own abilities that it's going to come to fruition. And so doing all of that in real estate to apply it now would look like taking, okay, God, this is the property I want. And I have these conversations just like we're having now with them. Like that's just the way I am. That's the way I see it. And I'm like, all right, well, let's say I want to buy this property. And then I'll write it down. I will literally write the address down on a sheet of paper. And I will literally go down and I will just write the first thing that comes to mind as I think these steps through. So in this case, right, I found a property, my very first one. I found it was $45,000. It was a 5 bedroom, 2 bath home on over an acre. Yeah. So unicorn of a deal. I truly
Mhm.
don't know if I'll ever find another one like it. And I had no way to buy it, no idea what I was doing, had never invested before. So I called this friend of mine, and he is a builder. And I said, hey, I have an opportunity. I'm going to buy this property. I had 3 agents that had looked at it with me prior when I was sitting here analysis by paralysis or paralysis by analysis, sitting over dwelling on this property that had came to me off market. And they originally wanted me to sell it for them, this seller. And I said, let me think about it. Let me do some research. I'll get back to you. Less than a week later, I had already taken several agents by. They all told me, don't buy this. This is a waste of money. It's a money pit. Don't like lose their number. You can maybe sell it cash to somebody. But none of these agents were investors. Like that's the issue, except for one that had 20 years ago. So prior to the recession, and then seeing all that got fear instilled. So he was there, not his fault, but he was portraying that fear because most people will reflect what they're taking in, just like you are who you surround yourself with. So I took that and I was like, you know what? No, I still have a gut feeling like this is the one. I'm going to do it. It's a risk I'm willing to take. My wife made one rule, and it was one thing, Corey, that like nobody wants to hear as a man of a household, having income, having bills, having the responsibilities that come with it that we see as obstacles so often. She said, don't use our money. I was like, all right, well, God, clearly this wasn't of you because the woman you put in my life just told me not to use our money. How am I going to buy a $45,000 house, no matter how good of a deal it is, without any money? Well, I brought a partner in. And so he was not the first call I made, believe it or not, but he was the first person that I invited to the property. So I'm very big also on when you meet with somebody or you speak with somebody about an opportunity, how are they requiring? Like, how are they receiving that?
Mhm.
And how engaged are they with that? Great example, right? And this is just really throwing myself under the bus, curb stomping my face here. But like you, right? You've been very intentional. We've talked about this several times. And dude, I love you to death. And I think you know that. The intent is to do this, is to continue on this path, get into a real estate investing, keep pushing it, keep talking to people, extending our network, learning what value we can bring and we can receive. And dude, I've like, it's so easy to just get consumed with what we're doing that we'll get tunnel vision. Well, that would not be a good example of somebody who you need to work with at that time, right? So that's a lot of like, you need somebody that's going to be focused as much as you are or wanting to be equally invested, because if the passion's not there, then chances are you're not going to both be trying to push the same direction at that time. And sometimes it's just a timing thing. And so anyway, I invited him to this property and I said, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And he was all about it. The second we got out of at the property, he was like, done. And I was like, where are we going to get the money? He was like, I don't know, but we'll figure it out. And I'm like, that's the guy. Like, this is going to happen. And it wasn't like a, hey, maybe if you want to invest. It was a very adamant, dude, I was sweating too. Like, I don't even know to this day if he realizes this, but like I was sweating when I showed it to him because I was like, one way or another, I've got to get this house. I didn't know how. It had polybutylene plumbing. It needed full renovation. It needed everything. No idea if the septic was a upside down VW bug with gravel in it, for all I knew. Like, no idea. But I knew I needed to get this house. And so we turned around though, and he goes, yeah, man, we need to get it. And I'm like, all right. And he was like, I'll even do the repairs at cost. And I'm like, what? Like, we put a new roof, new plumbing, like we renovated the inside for rental level, and it was all intentional. So I did all the numbers on the front end up front of what did we need this to look like, rental or whatever, and running spreadsheets and contracts and leveraging commissions in this case, right? And different things to where it made sense for both parties. But we also solved a problem for that seller. They were completely out of state. The seller lived in London, England, never came to the States. He happened the day we found out from the attorney that we had to have a mail away closing, or sorry, power of attorney. The missionary from Coming Baptist happened to be in London, France that same day by happenstance. And this seller knew him and said, hey, well, he's in town. I'll just get him to do it. Okay, God, like clearly you're lining these things up because I could not have planned that. So he comes back and he's writing this full out sentence of who he is and all this as the signature on every single document. We do a cash sale. I take over the property. We immediately started renovations. And when we got done, Corey, we bought it for 45,000. We put about 45,000 into it. So we're netting about 90 grand right there. We paid a healthy return back to the investor once we refinanced it. It appraised for $316,000. So just there, right? Your debt, like equity, what was it, 315? You're sitting at about 265, and we left a third of that in the property and equity. We turned around and left a healthy return back to the investor, and we put 100 grand in the account, business account, to start it off immediately. Open LLC, 50-50 partnership, threw all this stuff in there, handed that off, and then took that and ran and bought other properties using it as down payment. And what did that first private investor do? Which, by the way, is not always a corporation or whatever, is Billy Bob down the street in overalls that's got more cash than you know about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's building trust and value in those people and bringing them a healthier return that they're not going to be able to get. And oftentimes it's the guy that resents the government, that doesn't want to invest his money into a bank. You make a good friendship with him. You prove to him through that transactional opportunity, no matter how small that may be, that you can handle it. And you put them as the lien holder on the property. That's a big key too. That way, if anything ever happened, they have the security up front of, well, at the end of the day, if nothing else works, I get the property for 45 grand or 100 grand. Why wouldn't they do it then?
Yeah.
They get a great deal and opportunity that they didn't have to find, that they didn't have to rehab. By that point, you've probably got half the renovations in it. And then you have to make sure all your numbers make sense. But at the end of the day, they're not going to come after you because they've got a new property that they can turn around and sell for more than they've sent to you. So they're going to get a better return because they're just a lien holder. But you hold the property on paper as the owner. So you can still do everything you need to do. If you go refinance it, you're technically refinancing something that you own outright. So there's a lot of taking your time through that process really does a big difference, and not trying to rush any of it, because no matter how much we want it all today, that's where we go back to get rid of that instant gratification mindset and remembering that everything you're doing, every interview you do is a building block to where Corey's going to be 10 years from now. And it's like, dude, not caring what people think goes so far too. And like we've talked about that many times, I know, even at the stations. And it's just like when you really care more about what you think than what other people around you are thinking, that's when you really start to see the growth in your own life, and you compare yourself to yesterday instead of those around you. We could talk about that for hours, but it's just mind blowing. And then, so all of that to say, these goals are really, they're meant to push you. My goal out of all of these is to keep myself uncomfortable, because you won't ever find your growth in the comfort. We can all set realistic goals, right? We see realistic. And a lot of times I hear people say that, and then they're setting goals that are like, talk to 5 people in the next month. Okay, cool. But you could do that today.
Mm-hmm.
Like, are you setting your goals hard enough? Are you making them challenging enough? Because you need to be able to, just like fire department or recruit school, you need to get to that point where you don't want to go anymore, so that you can truly get more growth out of that last push up or that last search. And that last 30 seconds after you've already went through all the air in your tank and you're 10 steps from the door, are you going to make it through that door? If you're walking on your feet through that door, you are not trying or pushing yourself hard enough. You've got to be sucking down a bottle, mask stuck to your face. You know what I'm saying? Like, to get through that door. And I just don't think a lot of people, and I could be wrong. Like, I could be way wrong. This is just Brandon's perspective, but I don't think enough people challenge themselves in a way that's going to keep them motivated, that's going to keep them driven, and then they're not consistent enough. Like, I fail at that too, but it's not about, oh man, I didn't get this done, or I didn't get like, we can sit there and sulk in it, or we can just, all right, cool. I know what I need to do. I learned from this. Next, move on. Don't waste any more time sulking in yesterday's issues or could have beens than you need to. Like, I heard a quote the other day, and cut me off if I'm going too long, man.
No, I love it.
Like, it blew my mind because it made me step back, and it was worry and stress are the down payment on things out of your control that you may never see. And I was just like,
say that one more time, but slower.
Worry and stress are the down payment on something out of your control that you may never see happen.
Okay.
And it just hit me like a ton of bricks and made me step back, because especially with that jump in real estate, right? Wife 8 months pregnant, jumping into real estate full time, having no idea what I was doing. And I didn't go to some big KW brokerage that was going to have all these people that wanted a percentage of my check, but were going to help me and all that. Like, no, it was figured out. I had a great broker that I was working with, but there was a smaller knit community, and it was a smaller reach, and it was a smaller resources. Like, it was limited. So it was a lot of, all right, I'm going to figure this out, but I'm also going to know those that I can trust. I'm going to lean on their experience as well. Focus on bringing value to them. I joined a mentorship program. I spoke with my broker. I took him to lunch. I took those other agents around me that have been doing it for a little while to lunch, I brought value to them in any way that I could, and it comes back. And now I look at those same agents and we're doing equal or better business with each other, and it's collaborating. It's not competition. It's, dude, tell me about some successes this week. There's several of them that we call randomly. I'm like, dude, what'd you do? How'd this week go? What wins did you have? Just to reflect on those, because what you focus on prospers. And so the more you focus on your next goal, the more you focus on those baby steps and celebrate them, the more you focus on, as a family, what you've accomplished this year. My wife and I have a jar every year that we fill up with random things, like what went right today? What was a win today? We don't write down all the negatives. We don't write down anything that failed. We don't write down any of that stuff, because that stuff is going to come and go. We can't control it. If we could control it, it would have been a win, right? And so it's at the end of the year, we sit there on New Year's and we go through and we'll read them all. And it's like, wow, God, look what you did. And it's things that I can't even begin to take credit for, because it all just fell into place. Like a missionary in France, in London, that happens to be there when we need a power of attorney.
Mm-hmm.
And it's mind blowing. But it's a lot of baby steps, and it's far beyond. You'll end up going far beyond any plan you may have made.
Yeah. So there was something you said that reminded me, and I'm not sure where you're at on your journey with, I do 75 hard and all that stuff. But another buddy of mine, he actually just started phase 2 of the program. And he's a younger kid, and he's done a lot. He's made some big changes since starting the program. But he was expressing that he feels like he's losing, even though he's grown so much. He feels like he's losing. And I actually, whether it's just a combination of things that I've heard and learned and all that stuff, but I feel like I created a pretty good quote. Um, but basically, I had said, dude, that's the point. Okay. You want to progress so much that you feel like you're losing, but what you don't realize is that what you consider losses are someone else's champion requirement.
Yep. That's exactly right.
So even though you're progressing, you're getting better, it's going to suck. You're going to feel like you're losing. But if you look back at where you started,
Yeah,
you'd never even imagine that that's where you're getting to.
that's right. That's exactly right, man. I mean, that's that balance, right? Between the desire of where you want to be and your vision, but also balancing, those expectations and what that is, right? Because a lot of times at least me, I'll find myself justifying, oh, well, I didn't get X number of calls or X number of deals done this month, or, whatever, because of my family. Don't ever do that, by the way. Or because of, a kid's birthday party, or because of whatever. Like, wait a minute, let's back up. Like, doesn't that kind of defeat the whole point then of why you want your time back in the first place? For those things, to be present with my son, to be present with my wife? Isn't that kind of the whole point, the bigger picture? So I'll find myself having to zoom out, if you will, and look at the big picture of my life, right? And say, okay, God, well, clearly this was a mission to free my time so I can better serve you in ways or whatever capacity you bring, using the resources you provide to bring value and service to others. So if I take that and I say, okay, God, well, I get to do this, right? It's just that perspective shift of, instead of I had to or I missed it, it's I get to. And it's just so simple, but it really does change your cortex, like in your brain, of what you're focusing on. So instead, you see prosperity through it instead of the reasons or justification of it. Typically, if you have to justify it, there's something wrong there.
Yeah. Well, that's great, man. I learned some stuff from you. Didn't know about, a bunch of stuff, and I love hearing people's success stories. It's great. Um, is there anything else you want to talk about before we get into the last section of the podcast?
Briefly, and I'll be very brief with this, but I just want to say, like, if you're an investor or you're wanting to be an investor and you're sitting here and you're like, man, I just don't know where to get started. Brandon, how did you find a house like that? How in the world do I get into this space? I just want to encourage you to do like Corey's doing right here. Like literally talk to people that are doing what you want to do and surround yourself with them, because at the end of the day, your net worth truly is your network's net worth. Like you literally will be more like those you surround yourself with. So continue to surround yourself with those people, continue to listen more than speaking, and continue to do and replicate what they're doing. Don't reinvent the wheel. There are thousands of people doing exactly what we're talking about right here, and you can do it too. So keep listening to Corey, keep listening to these podcasts. And that's just really what I want to take time and say, because there's so much value that you give through these, and so much value that these different speakers are coming on here sharing and being vulnerable in that. Because, dude, I haven't talked about this very much with a lot of people, but I felt it necessary to get on here with you. And I just think a lot of that comes from you honestly pulling it out of me, whether you realized it or not. And that's pretty much it. I just want to encourage those that are looking at investing to do so. And remember that your most growth will come from action, no matter whether that results through failure and then you get back up again or not. Most of it's a strategy learned. That's why millionaires, even when they go broke, they get back quicker, oftentimes higher than they were, because they learned the systems, they learned the network, they learned what it took, what things mattered, what things don't. And then don't be afraid to starve for a year if that's what it takes to be doing well for a lifetime.
Hmm. That's good, and thank you. What you're saying, it's beneficial. Helps me mentally know that hopefully I'm actually helping people by doing this as well. I mean, being selfish, I did this simply because this is how I found to network with people. But other people, if you're watching and this helps you, that's great. Let me know. I'd love to hear about it. Um, but that being said, let's jump into the last section of today's episode. So, first off, what made you want to be on the podcast today?
I'm kind of biased to the host. That helps. That goes a long way, right? Corey, as many of you have gotten to know if you've been listening to these, as I hope you have, has a funny bone somewhere and he can't find it, and we all kind of get touched by it. So he brings out the best in those around him, and I'm really thankful for it. And so I honestly, I woke up, man. We spoke this morning. Actually, I don't know that many people would realize that, but we spoke this morning, and I said, okay, it's the day. Like he's reached out to me several times and we've talked about this, and I'm very fortunate and thankful to be one of those he's considered to have on. Um, and I woke up this morning and was like, yeah, it's the day. Like I need to speak with Corey today. I need some Corey in my life today. And it really just came down to I think honestly another moment too to self-reflect on, hey, how did we get where we're at? Because nobody maintains motivation. It's a fleeting service. It does not stay around. It's the discipline and consistency that comes through your action that oftentimes you just need a glimpse of what's worked in the past. There's a song that keeps going through my head and I've heard a couple times lately, and it's, God, I just need a memory of a victory. I just need a memory of a rock and a sling. And it goes, down goes the bear, down goes the lion, here goes the giant. Like down goes the giant. And it's talking about David in the Bible. And I won't elaborate deep on that, but it's a lot of times that's all we need in life is just days like this and moments like this where we can self-reflect and reflect with others and share our experiences and what we're learning so that they don't have to go through the same thing, or maybe they pull something from that helps them. If one thing I've said today helps somebody with their investment journey, I've succeeded. And that's the way I see it. Just like I would spiritually, is sometimes all we need is a memory of a victory, a memory of something that went right, a memory of a win. And that's another reason to write down those things and put them into jars so that at the end of the year you can open them up, because you've got a ton of memories there that you may not have remembered otherwise.
That's good. That's beautiful. Second question. And I'm actually probably going to switch this up here in just a second. But why aren't we doing business together?
Dude, that's on me, actually. So I would say a lot of it business there just comes down to opportunity, right? I think we just need to find that right opportunity that makes sense for both of us to be able to move something forward and move something, progress it in the right direction. We'll definitely be talking more soon about some opportunities, right? And see what comes from that. A lot of people run into capital. And I think honestly, that might be one that we'll be pushing through here soon. Finding those ways, right, and bringing that capital opportunity into the equation of, okay, well, let's find the deal and then find the financing and push forward. And a lot of times it's just doing enough of those opportunities, seeking out enough of those opportunities, and formulating a list that you can take to any of those investors, so to speak, or as yourself, and going down that list, because you find enough of them, there's going to be one that works out. If you want something to happen bad enough, you'll find a way to make it happen, right?
Mhm.
So I would say that's a lot of it. It's just going to come down to that one deal, right? That
Yeah.
$45,000 house. It doesn't
So
always work out. That is a unicorn of a
this
deal, by the
this
way.
this is how I wanna switch it up. I normally just move straight on to the next question. Um, I'm looking for small multifamily, okay?
Okay.
So, I know you've got resources, stuff like that. I wanna partner with you on something, whether it's a duplex, triplex, quad, whatever. Let's get that going, get some
Okay.
cash flow in our hands.
Sounds good. You want to stay under 4 units?
Honestly, I'm looking anywhere from, like, 2 to 10, but start lower, ideally. Trying to utilize the stack. I'm sure you've heard of the stack.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So
You got it.
my goal is to at least get 4 units this year. If I can get that in one transaction, then I'll bump it up by the end of the year. But we'll start there, and then I can't get less than 5 after that.
Okay. What
Yep.
what area do you want to be in? Do you have a preference?
So right now, I'm just looking in Georgia for multifamily. I'm trying to talk with some people, find out really good areas. So if you know anywhere specifically that would be great when it comes to rents and stuff, definitely when it. I'm focusing on that right now. Probably next year I'll try and buy some, maybe one appreciating single family home, like either in Chattanooga or
Yeah.
probably closer to Hilton Head, because those markets are appreciating like crazy right now.
Yeah.
So, but that's for next year.
Sounds good. Hey, that's the thing though, man. You gotta have these, it's long-term goals and then breaking them down from there. And if that's the vision, that's the vision.
Yep.
Just keep going.
Awesome. That was the switch up. Now, back to the questions.
Love it.
What would you say are your strengths, either in business or your personal life?
Okay, so I would balance that. I would say strengths, which obviously most people, the irony is most of us can define our weaknesses quicker than our strengths. And that's just because we naturally see the dark. We focus on the dark, right? And but I would say my strengths when it comes to it is communication, um, which is honestly going to fit both sides of that bill. But being able to clearly communicate with somebody in a way that's going to allow me to identify what the problem is and then find a way to make what I have as a service the solution to that. Because oftentimes it's not about manipulating somebody into a process or a sales pitch. It's about finding a way to solve their issue and their ultimate why. Like if they're selling a property or they have a property that they've held for a long time, why are they selling it? Or why would they consider selling it to you? And then figuring out, okay, well, what solutions out of the different creative financing ways or financing methods, whether it's private capital, seller financing, whatever, what of these would solve their problem? How can I orchestrate this in a way that's going to bring them an answer that's going to make them want to sell or move forward with that? And so I would say my strength most of the time, especially in real estate sales on that side of the business, comes from identifying that problem and identifying the purpose behind their sale or purchase. And then sometimes in that case, and then solving it with them, remembering that it's about the client and their needs, not Brandon getting a commission or Brandon selling or buying an investment property. How can I serve them and truly be of service? Because oftentimes I've found that most business ends up coming through referral business after that. You take care of the client, you keep their needs primary. I've had agents, like I've literally had clients pay me a difference in commission because the other side wasn't paying what they thought it should have been paying. And that blew my mind. But it came because my focus wasn't on Brandon making a check. It was on Brandon taking care of them. What's going to be in their best interest? Even if on the investment side, I've done the same. Like, ironically, it sounds like, oh man, you raked them. You got 45 grand for a house. Like, no, we had to go in there and redo everything. And it was the price that they set, not me. Like,
Mhm.
always. And so the strengths, honestly, a lot of it just comes back to that, like identifying that problem or identifying what the cause for the conversation is, and then how can I do something about it? Or how can I bring the resources to the table that can do something about it?
And see, this is why, um, one reason I started this podcast, yes, was to network with people and increase my network, but I wanted to build that communication skill, right? And that's honestly, guys, uh, this just for everybody watching, this is one of the, I think, easiest skills to build.
Yeah.
I was scared to death at first to just talk to people, but that's literally all you have to do. And actually, you don't even have to do that much talking. Just now, I asked Bell what his strengths were. He said communication. I didn't say anything. He kept on going, and really, what he alluded to was that his strength is problem solving, right? So, like, I didn't have to speak a whole lot, and he just dug deeper himself. That's the beauty of communication. So,
You also know
anyway,
me well enough, though, to know that I will ramble, and they've gotten to
oh
know
yeah,
that, I'm sure, now over the last 46 minutes.
it's great. Um, so let's flip that then. What is your weaknesses then? What do you struggle with?
Well, I'd start that off with communication as well, right? Because I'm the same, and it's true. I mean, honestly, it's one of those things where, as you just said, right? It's sometimes it's over communicating. Is you can identify a problem and bring the solution to the equation, but if you're spending 45 minutes going over it all and over analyzing, if you will, or over explaining things, you do what most women or my wife may call mansplaining it. Then you sit there and you've just said 100 words, what could have been two. Problem solving, right? And so that's something that I'm going to have to work on, and I'm identifying for
Now,
sure.
isn't it? This is totally off topic. Isn't it interesting that what 15 years ago, I think maybe 10, 15 years ago, there was a bigger trend of women being like, "Oh, their men are like cavemen. They don't, blah blah blah." And now that
Yep.
we actually started trying to talk on their level, now they're like, you're mansplaining. You're talking too much." Hang on a second. You want us to go back to Ooga Booga? Like what? So sorry, that was
There's no
totally off
balance.
topic. I
Yeah,
have no
there's no balance.
no malevolence towards that. I just thought it was interesting. Um, awesome. So then, last main question, because it's actually not the last question. I gotta stop saying last question. Um, what do you need help with that will make you money in the next 30 days?
Referrals, genuinely, and I know that sounds like, "Well, why would I give it to you if I know it?" Well, a lot of times it's that, like we talked about, right? Referring business, "Hey, I know an agent that's investor friendly. Send them my contact, send them my Insta, send them stuff like that, and tell me that you sent them." You can actually go to my Instagram. There's a link tree link there. You can see my access contact details there. You can reach out that way as well, and just connect us, and then keep me in the loop that you're the one that did it, so that we can keep in touch and we can keep sending business both ways, because it's an exchange of information. And then over time, we continue to grow that, and we're doing business together. And you're getting wholesale deals to me, or you're getting, different ways that we can structure the deals to where you're involved, and your involvement gets carried because you brought value to the table there. A lot of times, most deals will close within 30 days to 45 days, if not less, depending on the transaction and the financing. So for me, that's a lot of it, is the referral business. And then knowing that if there's not something I can do about the deal to help you, I'm going to help you find somebody who can.
Okay, so let's expand on that just a little bit. Referrals. What exactly are you able to help with? You mentioned wholesalers. So are you bringing buyers? Are you going to represent people who want to sell their property? Like, what all are you wanting to help with?
I've done both. So as far as wanting to, I'm open to whatever opportunities, right? I'm at that point too in my career where I've expanded into a little bit of all of it. I'm not quite to the point, I would say, where I am focused solely on one avenue. And that's kind of the kryptonite to the situation, right? Because it's better to be a master of one. I truly feel that, because you don't need to, we need to have our niche. We don't need to be a servicer of everything. And so I would say, in short, at that point, it's really going to come down to, if you have a deal, like you find a deal, you're like, "Hey, I found this person that wants to sell this property. You know, do you have a buyer?" Yeah, chances are I'm going to. And then vice versa, literally. And that's kind of why the only way I can really answer the question would be that I can service both sides, depending on the situation. Because most of the time, what I have is I either have a seller that doesn't have, like, the buyer that we would have for it isn't interested in that particular property. Because what you'll find is a lot of buyers typically are very niche as well. They want a certain kind of house in a certain area, a certain criteria. Well, those don't always match up and in the same, like, with the same agent. So a lot of times it's either going to market with that listing. And so that's kind of where I'm on the lower end of what's coming into me right now has been less listing opportunities, because at the end of the day, I can either list the home, buy the, buy the home, wholesale the home, or refer a home. So I have a lot more of an avenue on the list side of things. However, I do have buyers too, investor friendly buyers that do turn around and buy properties. We sold one in Tacoma. We sold one in Cornelia. I sold one, like, with buyer to those buyers out of, um, I'm drawing a blank. Anyway, most of it centralized to Northeast Georgia, and a lot of it came back to just constant interaction, like bought and sold with these agents and buyers and investors multiple times. Because what you'll find is no matter which side of that deal you're bringing, you typically will end up doing business with that person again. If you're going to do any business in that general area, you'll find that most of these investors are centrally located to those spaces that they're looking in. They'll have one or two cities that they're like, all right, I want to stay heavy in this area. And most times it's not due to anything you might expect. It's going to be because there's a factory coming up down the road that's within walking distance of X number of houses. Or there's whatever, like, focus on jobs and invest around that, and you will have renters. You will have an influx of opportunity. The question will come down to what can you get the properties in that location at, and will the rents that you can bring in that area meet what it is?
Gotcha. So these, okay, so
I know that was
I
kind of
want to
all over
make
the
it, I want to make it real specific so that people watching this know how they can work with you. So for people who, oh, sorry, my wife is amazing. Thank you so much. You're welcome. A little coffee, fresh. So people who have a deal, whether you're a wholesaler or agent, I'm assuming. Is that right?
Yeah.
Um, if you have a deal, you can reach out to Bell. I still, you can reach out
That's
to
fine.
Brandon.
Fire department, we call each other by last name for those that
Yeah.
don't know.
You can reach out to Brandon. He will hopefully have a buyer for you. If not, he can definitely help you find a buyer. What about?
I would say, if I can, I'll interrupt you there for just a second, and out of respect, but I will say the simplest way I can answer that really, I think, comes down to call me if you have a deal. Let's talk through it. Even if I can't help you, I can help you analyze the deal, and I can help you figure out what's going to be the best option for you, whether that includes me or not. Like, I've had 3 in the last month that I've spoken with that I didn't even end up being a part of it. One was even down in Palmetto, Georgia, which is class like South Fulton, and I had nothing to do with it, duplex. But it ended up closing and everything, and I had zero to do with it. Didn't make a commission check or nothing, but that wasn't what it was about, right? It was about bringing value, especially in situations like this one where I had none to take from it. Because at the end of the day, I'm going to end up doing business with those people again, and they're going to remember my name. And that's what you want. You want to be putting value and planting value into places that you may never expect a return back, or you may never see another return back. But at the same time, you know that if something else comes up, guess what? They're going to call you, because they're going to also have this. It may sound like mess up here, right? But they're going to have this indebted feeling of like, man, dude, he brought me something that he didn't even have to. He didn't make a dime off of. He had no connection. He just connected the pieces and walked away. And then when that opportunity comes up that they feel you can benefit from, guess who they're calling first? And that's exactly what I would recommend too for those looking for growth and looking for opportunity, is find ways to push value where you may or may not even be involved in the transaction. But know that I'm a resource for that as well, because I will be glad to sit down and go over any transactions or deals that you may have. Even if you have both parties and you just want to be like, hey, can I get a second set of eyes on this?
Gotcha. Okay. Sweet. Well, yeah. I mean, no, I totally agree with that. And basically, there was something that you said that reminded me of. Have you ever heard of Alex Hermosi?
Yeah.
Okay, so there was
School.
something. Yeah, yeah. He had mentioned that people will always remember the first amount, or the one to bring value first.
Yeah.
Right. And now he talked about that in one of his books. So he made the example that if you buy someone, say, his book and give it to them, if they act on it and start building their business, they're always going to remember you for providing that value first.
Yep.
Right. So in a sense, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to get that value to them first so that they will remember you later on.
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right. Well, we've rambled. We've learned some good stuff. I see you've, yeah, I got to remember your Instagram there. Is there anywhere else that people can get in contact with you if they have something that they want to share with you, or if they just need your help?
Absolutely. So, as I was saying, my contact information is also on the Instagram. There's a link tree there with more information, as well as any active listings that I have currently. As again, I am a sales agent as well, but also investors. So, you can access my number 678-477-4786. Emails closingbellrealestate@gmail.com. This is all listed again at that link. And then you can also find me at Brandon Bell Properties on Facebook. And yeah, you can always reach out to Corey too if all else fails. He'll put you in touch.
Yep. So I will put your Facebook link in the description of this video. It was a little long and cumbersome to put on here. So, but great. Awesome, man. Look, I really appreciate you hanging out with me for just about an hour. I know you're a busy man, so I'll send you the back, close this thing up, and then let you get back to doing some good business.
Looking forward to it, man. We'll work together real soon, and I appreciate your time. Thanks for taking me on.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brandon. That's so weird to say, Brandon.
You can say Bell. Closing Bell is the name.
Thanks, Bell.
See you, man.
Oh, cut him off there. Anyways, that's our show, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a lot. I hope you saw the type of man that Brandon Bell is, and reach out to him. Even if you don't have anything right now, get in contact with him. He's a great guy to know. He's a real, even though he didn't use this term, he's a real go-giver. So that being said, I hope you like and subscribe this video. If you didn't like it, cool, whatever. If you did like it, leave a comment. Tell us what you did like. If you didn't like it, tell us what you didn't like. Might look, whatever. You get the gist. I'll look at it. I'll either comment and respond. Probably won't, because I'm terrible with this type of thing, just being honest. But I hope you come back next week. And until then, have a wonderful day.